Hi everyone. Today we have the first lecture in this academic year, and I hope that this academic year will be fruitful and successful for you. I wish you the best. According to the syllabus of our course, poetry, the English poetry, 16th century and the 17th century poetry. The first part will deal with the 16th century poetry, and as an introduction to the 16th century poetry, I prefer to say something about the predominant themes and the poetic devices in the 16th century poetry, because these themes and poetic devices will frequently appear in the poems that we are going to study in this course. The first theme is courtly love. Courtly love is a phenomenon dating back to the late 11th century Provence, and among its sources, Arab lyrics of Spain. It centers around love and chivalry. The second theme is time. Time and its adverse effect on the beauty of the beloved, the beauty of woman. The third theme is time again. Time as fickle fortune or vanity of life. The last one, or the fourth theme that will be found in the poems that we are going to study, is the Pastoral Convention. Pastoral Convention means to, the poet will praise the style of life in the countryside rather than the town or the center of the city center. These are the main themes that dominated in the 16th century poetry. We are going to see these themes in the poems that we are going to study. Concerning the poetic devices and the poetic purposes that are related to the 16th century, we can find one of the important poetic purposes, which is the sonnet. The sonnet appeared firstly in Italy in the 13th century. The 14-line sonnet originated in Italy, probably in the 13th century, and was used by two Italian masters, Dante and Petrarch. The main theme of the sonnet is love. The sonnet is borrowed to English literature and English poetry throughout the writings of, throughout the poetry of, the poems of Sir Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey. They played a significant role in borrowing such a poetic purpose, such a poetic device to English poetry. They were the first sonneteers in English poetry in the 16th century, of course. Sir Thomas Wyatt borrowed the sonnet, and this type of sonnets is called the Italian sonnet or the Petrarchan sonnet, since it depends on the rhyme scheme of Petrarch himself. I mean, without certain modification. But Henry Howard had modified the Petrarchan sonnet to create what is called the English sonnet, or later on the Shakespearean sonnet. Of course, the English sonnet can be recognized through certain distinctive features. Number one, the rhyme scheme of the quatrain is interwoven. Thus, the lines are held together. This is on page 36 in the textbook. Number two, new rhymes are introduced in the second quatrain. Number three, the sestet is not divided into two tercets, as is the case in the Italian type, that is, in the Petrarchan type, in the Petrarchan sonnet, that is used by Sir Thomas Wyatt. Number four, as the Italian sonnet, a climax will frequently still occur at the end of the octave with a pause that usually called a change in the direction of thought. And the last feature of the English sonnet, yet the weight of emphasis tends to shift towards the final couplet, which, with its emphatic rhyming, is well suited to forceful, conclusive, memorable, and very often witty statements, as is evident in the Shakespearean sonnets. According to these features, Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, has written his sonnets, and Shakespeare later on has made use of such a model that has been modified by Henry Howard to present, to introduce more than 120 sonnets. That's why such a type of sonnet, in addition to calling it or naming it as the English sonnet, it is also later, it is called the Shakespearean sonnet for this reason. According to our syllabus for this academic year, Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, will be our first target to be studied and to be analyzed. According to the syllabus, Henry Howard will be studied with reference to his sonnet, which is entitled Spring. Spring is a sonnet that can be found on page 80 in our textbook, the 16th century poetry, English poetry, the 16th century. On page 80, we are going to find Henry Howard's sonnet, Spring. He says in this sonnet, the sweet season, sometimes it is called the sweet season, and the other times it is called spring, or originally it is, as it is published in the first anthology of poetry as the description of spring, or spring, or the sweet season. The sweet season that bud and bloom forth brings, with the green hath clad the hill and eke the vale. The nightingale with feathers new she sings, the turtle to her make hath told her tale. Summer is come for every spray, now springs. The hart hath hung his old head on the pale, the buck in the brake, his winter coat he flings. The fishes float with a new repaired scale. The adder, all her slough away she slings. The swift swallow pursues the flies small. The busy bee her honey now she minks. Winter is warm, that was the flower's bale. And thus I see among these pleasant things each care decays, and yet my sorrow springs. Well, in this sonnet, the season or spring, he uses this to brilliant effect. This is one of the first sonnets written in English, but it is not as well known as it perhaps should be. We think the season is also one of the finest English poems written about summer, though it also takes in the spring season too. Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard it was first published in English poetry, first ever verse anthology. That contains the songs and sonnets of Henry Howard and Thomas Wyatt and others. In this anthology, this sonnet appeared as the description of spring. As we have seen, and as we have read, the sonnet, this is the sonnet. Henry Howard's sonnet is about the coming of summer and the various ways in which a world previously in a sort of stasis or hibernation, just like the period of time in which the reptilians, like the snakes and the other reptilians, are in hibernation during the days of and the nights of winter. So it's about the coming of summer after the end of winter, after this period of time in which the reptilians and the snakes are semi-dead, unable to move. They are sleeping. They are in stasis. But now is spring. Spring will come into life. suit, in suit season means sweet. So he describes spring as being sweet, and he says something about the description of this sweet season that bud and bloom forth brings, with green hath clad the hill and eke the vale. This is the description of the atmosphere during spring. The nightingale with feathers new she sings. The turtle to her make hath told her tale. He is going to give the description, the full description of life during winter. The hill will be seen as green, and the nightingale is active. She sings. The turtle to her make hath told her tale. Which tale? Summer is come, for every spray now springs. The hart hath hung his old head on the pale. The hart, the male of deer. The buck in the brake, his winter coat he flings. The fishes float with a new repaired scale. And the adder, the snake, all her slough away she slings. She takes off the skin in order to grow up, as well as to continue its life. In all these lines, the previous lines, starting with the first line in the sonnet till this line, I mean the other, all her slough away, and the swift swallow also flies small, and this is the growing of the small birds. This is the activities that are done by the various types of animals. So everywhere there is some sort of activity that is done, or certain scene that can be seen, like the scene of the hill as a green. It is covered with the grass. Okay, so these are the illustrations that have been given or presented to illustrate the or to emphasize the idea of the activity that comes with the coming of spring and summer. Both of them are references to life, to the active life, rather than, I mean, in contrast with life that is semi-absent in autumn and winter. The busy bee her honey now she minks. Winter is worn, that was the flower's bale. here the lands are filled with flowers. This is also a reference to spring, another illustration to emphasize the idea of the perfect scene of life. And thus I see among these pleasant things each cure decays, and yet my sorrow springs. He kept the forceful and the conclusive idea to the last line. In the previous 13th lines, the poet tries to describe, to give different descriptions to the life of the different creatures in spring, but he kept the conclusion to the last line, or to the final couplet in this sonnet. And thus I see among these pleasant things each cure decays, and yet my sorrow springs. In spite of the beauty of summer, of spring and summer, but he declares that he is sad, and there is no hope. Each cure decays, and yet my sorrow springs. So, in fact, he presented the description of summer and spring to give us the explanation of the hope that in fact these animals and these beautiful and nice pictures about nature, it is let us say a nice sonnet throughout the nice and beautiful descriptions of life, but at the end he presented the conclusion throughout the emphasizing on his own sadness, that there is hope, but not for him, not for the speaker. Hope is everywhere, but he doesn't feel such pleasant things that are around him. Henry Howard sonnet is about the coming of summer and the various ways in which world previously in a sort of stasis or hibernation is now springing into life. Sweet season means sweet. However, despite this, the Despite this, the poet's sorrow also springs into new life at this time. We usually associate autumn and winter with sorrow, but not the summer with sadness, that is. The hero of sorrow makes his sorrow all the more piquant precisely because it is surrounded by reminders of joy, life, activity, and vibrancy. All these things are around him, but he doesn't feel with such pleasant things. He is sad, and his sadness can never be changed with the existence of these nice and pleasant things. Isn't our own sorrow sometimes all the more keenly felt when everything else around us is joyful, and we know we should be happy too? But as Diana Wynne-Jones once remarked, she says this woman, happiness isn't a thing. You can't go out and get it like a cup of tea. It is the way you feel about things. You can't get happiness like getting or having a cup of tea, but it is a way to feel about things. Sometimes there is no rhyme or reason or season to unhappiness. Here in this paragraph, we may see the words that have been selected by the poet, like the suit season takes up the literary legacy of Middle English poetry, and specifically alternative verse, which is the way of constructing a poem rather than depending on rhymes. This is the one of the features of the period, of Middle English, which is the poem is considered as a legacy or part of the legacy of Middle English poetry. These move between the soft sibilants and that strike an appropriately summary note. Suit season, springs, and harsher sound conveying the vivid activity going on the natural world, and so on. So these are that's why he has selected these words to suit the alliterative verse that he uses. The last word, springs, is especially poignant given the seasonal focus of the poem. Spring and summer should not give rise to sorrow, and it is all the more arresting given that it comes hot on the heels of many previous ing rhymes, brings, sings, flings, slings, and so on. The suit season is not only one of the first English sonnets written in English It was written by the very man, or I mean the same man who invented the sonnet from the Shakespeare form that Shakespeare would later put his indelible stamp on. But Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, is not as celebrated as the bard, as the great poet, as Shakespeare, who has made use of such a model or such a type of English sonnets that have been modified for the first time by Henry Howard. Even a preliminary analysis of this suit season shows, however, that he didn't simply prepare the way for Shakespeare. He didn't put or bear in his mind that he will facilitate the matter in front of somebody else, like or some another poet like Shakespeare. He wrote a powerfully affecting and technically accomplished. He achieved a wonderful sonnet in his own right, that is for himself, rather to facilitate or to serve the other poets like Shakespeare or the other sonneters later on, who came later on, that is. So as a conclusion in this for our lecture for today, as a conclusion, or the poem in a brief is about the activities that are done and they are described through the different descriptions and illustrations that are given in the first 12 lines to focus on the activities that are done by the animals, the different animals and creatures, to show the face of hope, and to conclude at the end of in the final couplet of this sonnet that in spite of the existence of these in spite of the existence of the hope, but he, for himself, he is very sad, and there is no hope for him. He doesn't feel with happiness or the hope that he has expressed in the previous lines. Throughout the last line, each care decays, so there is no hope at all, and yet my sorrow springs. Still the sadness, deep sadness, is dominating. Thank you.